Hello, everyone, and thank you for watching our show again. We are very happy to welcome you in the second episode of LEORON Channel. I am Teuta, and today with me is Drena.
Hello from me, and thank you for being with us. Here we are again at LEORON TV, presenting you new guests from the learning industry. Today we will welcome Agron Kurtishi, who is the Associate Director at LEORON Institute for Consulting Services, with us in our studio, and the LEORON board member and expert trainer, Nigel Tomlinson, who will join us later via direct call.
They will both provide us with the latest insights on the impact of the human resources management in the business world and how the HR training can help companies and employees perform better.
Let us engage our first guest for today. Agron, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. It's great being here. Thank you for having me.
Agron, competency-based human resources management has become a significant area in the HR. It is well known that competency mapping is not just about choosing the right people for the right job. It's about more complex than it appears. I want to hear your opinion, or which HR function can be competency-based and how?
All right, yeah, that's correct. Nowadays, competency frameworks are being the main foundation that feed all other HR subsystems, starting from the HR planning process, the need of the business for human capital, assessing the human capital, but also doing the job and workforce planning and analysis. And moving on to the actual job analysis, so what we do is we typically take those frameworks, the competency frameworks that we produce, and we use these to identify what would be the accurate or full definition of the job profiles for each organization. In addition to that, another area that is very heavily influenced by the competencies is the recruitment process, starting from the selection of candidates through evaluation of the applicants, but also the actual recruitment interviews that the recruiters are conducting through, as we call them, competency-based interviews, right? But another also important area is the retaining of the talent. So when you have a proper, well-defined competencies, this helps in clarity about the job, about the behaviors that one should demonstrate at work, and this furthermore enhances the employee engagement, but also the loyalty of the employees. One of the key areas that is very important and is being fed by the competency frameworks is the L&D process. So we start by identifying the training needs for the employees, right? Through TNAs, we conduct analysis. What kind of behaviors are required to develop for the teams, right? Then based on the outcomes of the training needs analysis, we can design the training curricula, but also identify the delivery methods of the training. As the end process of the L&D, basically, we do competency-based training evaluation, and we measure the bridging of the gap for each of the competencies, pre and post, and of course, the training follow-up, which is very important for organizations to see if the learning or the development has been stuck with the employees, right?
Yeah.
Another also important area in HR that is being fed or is influenced by competencies is the HR development, specifically the performance management system, where we identify the developmental needs for each of the employees. In these performance conversations, we basically identify what are the gaps, what are the training needs, but also we add clarity to everyone in the organizations what kind of behaviors are important for each of the employees and what are the expected levels for each of the job positions, right? So this helps in designing proper career paths, right, for each of the employees, but also the employees can easily plan their careers and basically the progress of themselves as professionals within the corporate ladders, right? And finally, especially now recently, in the recent years, we have been seeing more and more influence of the competencies in the rewards process. Companies are tending to, in a way, link the rewards with the performance, right? So, and the performance is being fed by competency. So what we see now in the recent years is basically competency-based well-designed competency-based reward systems. So as you can see, the competency frameworks are feeding every HR subsystem in modern organizations. Unfortunately, not all organizations are grasping this idea, and as I can see from the projects that I've been working on, as the organizations mature, more and more they start implementing it in an integrated manner. But at the moment, unfortunately, the majority of organizations are not there yet. So there's still some work to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was a great elaboration of the answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agron, competency represents the language of performance.
Sure.
What value can well-designed behavioral competency add in this field?
Competencies help identify the skills, knowledge, and abilities or other behaviors that are critical to success in a job or a specific position. In the recent years, we see more and more competencies being embedded in the performance appraisals, performance conversations. Why? Because by having those embedded in the performance management system, we shape the behaviors that are expected for each of the employees, and those behaviors in support of the business objectives. So in addition to the objectives, so business objectives that are typically part of the critical part of the performance appraisal forums and the performance discussions, by adding the competencies, we specifically tell to employees, or we raise the clarity and awareness for everyone in the organization what kind of behaviors are required. And those are typically derived from the core values. So basically we are shaping the culture of the company, right? And behavior competencies are pretty much exactly that. So they are designed to drive performance, right? So if we see the structural components of a competency, starting from the competency heading or moving on to the definition, we have competency levels with specific behavioral indicators, which are pretty much performance statements. So we design and we estimate, or we add clarity how a performance should look like. Mm-hmm. So everyone in the organization, starting from the employee, but also the line managers, have clarity and understanding how does a success look like at the job. If we look at the structural component of the competency, we see now we have the competency heading, the definition, and other components are basically the behavioral indicators and the performance outcomes. So by having this clarity, we basically design how should a high performance look like while doing the job, while performing the competency. Now, this also serves as a measure in the discussion between the line manager and the employee, and basically serves to improve the performance, to identify what is required, and also to identify the developmental needs for each of the employees so they can bridge this gap, right? So to summarize, in addition to business goals, behavioral competencies can be used as a comprehensive performance description that employees and their managers use to measure and manage performance, as well as to establish their developmental plans. So the impact to the performance is very, very high.
Agron, when it comes to determining a competency framework, we know that HR has to investigate the vision of the organization, its future plan, existing employee capability, and industry practices. Can we come out with a common competency framework applicable for organization from different industry or similar industries?
Every organization is different,
Yes.
obviously, and it has specific corporate core values, and those are basically the foundation when we create the competency frameworks afterwards. So one size doesn't fit all. Every organization has a specific business model,
Sure.
although maybe similar. Different operating model, different plans for the future, and all this need to be reflected in the competency framework. So I would say that it's very hard to implement the same competency framework across different organizations. There are similarities, and there are lots of tentatives recently to, in a way, to templatize this process, right? There are lots of frameworks that have been created now, especially for the technical industries. Now we have the SPHERE framework, we have different various technical frameworks that can be used, but again, the organizations are left to choose those and to customize those as per their business needs, as per their vision, mission, as per their strategic plans, but also as per the, in the environment.
Right.
Also, the environment plays a huge role here. So I would say that there are no two same organizations. Thereby, although we can see some similarities, some overlaps, I would say that, and in my experience working with many organizations, pretty much every organization that I've been working with have specific areas that are, embedded in the competency frameworks. Sure. So I would argue that we can replicate the same competency framework on different industries, or use it as a template and to embed it in or implement it in another company.
Agron, do you agree with the following criticism of competency-based HRM model? It does not suit for all kinds of learners and may be limited in developing the higher level, more abstract knowledge and skills requiring creativity, high-level problem solving, and decision making. Could you please elaborate on this part?
Interesting question. I've heard this criticism previously, and in the recent years there have been, ideas how to solve this or overcome this criticism. One way of doing it is by introducing different ways of learning, right? So that's why in the recent years, in addition to the training and to the classical methods of development of the human resources, we see more and more alternative developmental solutions. We have the coaching, we have the mentoring, we have bite-sized learning, self-paced learning, but we also have, policies that shape the critical development experience of the employees through assignments, job rotations, and so on and so on. So I would argue that this criticism is right, and I would use an example. You mentioned the analytical skills,
yes,
and it as a very abstract, let's say. Of course, it is abstract, but it's in itself it has other areas that define further this competency. For instance, analytical skills as a competency cluster, I would say, it has inside the communication skills. People being able to ask lots of questions, problem solving as well. So all this can be learned. It's a skill. It's a trait and a skill that can be learned and can be further improved and enhanced. So with various alternative developmental solutions. And I think that this criticism is not on the spot. However, for leadership competencies, we find it difficult to put levels, or it's a longer journey. It's the thresholds or the limits, I would say, are very, very narrow. So it's hard to bring the leaders from one to another level of the competency. That's why when we design training programs and curricula, we tend to go on the highest level of the competency. Typically, it's the mastery level.
Agron, thank you very much for your answers. As you mentioned, everything can be learned, and I invite everyone to tune in LEORON Channel and learn from us for different industries. And now I'd like to connect with our expert trainer, Nigel Tamilson, which is online with us, and I want to welcome him in our show. Hello, Nigel. Thank you for joining us. Can you hear us?
Hello. How are you today?
I'm great. We're great, actually. How are you?
Oh, it's winter, so I'm just hoping it's going to warm up soon. I've had enough of this.
Nigel, we have started a new year filled with opportunities and challenges. I would like to hear from you, what is the main challenge that leadership and organizational development is facing nowadays?
Whoa, many. How long have you got? Well, it may well be a new year, but the same challenges remain.
That's
we have to accept that we live in what is now known as the VUCA age. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And these four factors really have become the new normal, if you like, over particularly the last 20 to 25 years. And the experts are saying everything from politicians to economists are saying that it's here to stay. So that places enormous daily challenges on leadership and organizational development. just to give you some examples,
Yeah.
change is now a constant. Technology is moving so quickly. That places pressure on systems. We cannot forget that globalization has been like a runaway train in the last 50 to 60 years, particularly. There's now much more of a focus on ethical behavior within organizations and the way that they act in their external environment. Environmental awareness has become all important, and quite rightly so, in my opinion. There are cultural issues, multicultural, intercultural, all brought about by the world now being a much smaller place. We've identified skills gaps. That's not surprising because there are labor shortages. In the developed world, there's certainly been a decline in the birth rate, which has been somewhat progressive since the end of the Second World War. So therefore, it should be no surprise that if we get a decline in the birth rate, then eventually we're going to have labor shortages. And labor shortages can therefore result in skills gaps. And let's not forget as well, work-life balance, or what some people refer to as the quality of life.
Right.
So all of these have come to play. So to succeed, the opportunities have to be identified. And that requires probably a VUCA of our own: vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. So the ability of organizations and their people at every single level to think strategically is now not something we'd like to have. It's now something we have to have. It's essential. I'm sorry if that sounds depressing. That is reality. But out of that reality and out of those challenges, I firmly believe there will be opportunities.
Nigel, senior
Yes.
leaders often receive most of their leadership training during the peak of their careers, when they have the most experience. Should leadership training be only for top performers?
Good question. And it's something I've seen a great deal of over the years. But I firmly believe that this is where so many organizations are making a mistake. In that an approach like this is not paying sufficient attention, in my opinion, to the need for one of the essential ingredients of good leadership, which is the need to have continuous succession planning. As you know, I'm something of a convert to the Japanese approach to leadership and to operations management. The Japanese have a very high regard and respect for both age and experience, which is what we're talking about here. But at the same time, they fervently and quite rightly believe that leadership exists at every single level of an organization.
Sure.
And therefore, it's the duty of that organization to identify and develop it. They fully understand that not everyone is going to make it right to the very top of an organization. But they believe that by developing a leadership mindset amongst their people, then in turn you will get the best out of your people. They believe it's a natural equation. They will find, those people then in turn will find the right level for themselves. And in turn it will bring what they believe is a sort of an equilibrium, a leveling to the organization and its operations. I'll give you an example from my own experience and with LEORON, from a particular client. Around 5 years ago, I was asked to deliver the International Certificate in Advanced Leadership Skills, the ICALS course, for in-house for a LEORON client, but to a class with a difference. It was a very large class with almost 30 delegates, which always worries me about trying to get the interaction right when you've got that many people in a class. But I needn't have worried. Every one of the delegates were medical students. They were trainee doctors. So none of them had reached 30 years of age. After having gone over the shock of this, of the average age of these people and the sector in which they worked, I remember asking the dean of the medical faculty why they were investing so much time, effort, and indeed money in this type of training. And he said that they didn't just want the next generation of doctors. They also wanted the next generation of leaders with strong communication skills, empathy, and a mind for innovation. And that this, in their opinion, was the right age group to start with. So it was almost perfect, a perfect mind of succession. Many organizations are now doing this, but it was the first time I had seen such a practice in the field of medicine. So I strongly believe we've got to move away from just investing such training with an older age group or experienced age group. And you have to start as soon as they come into the workplace. So that's very much the Japanese way, but it's something I've also seen put into place in certain places in the GCC countries as well.
Nigel, I know that you have worked with many leaders of different ages. I want to hear your vision for future leaders when it comes to, considering the mindset of the millennials and also the newest generation Z. I'm wondering how will organization will develop future leaders? What is your vision on that?
Yeah, Generation Z or Generation Z, as our American cousins would call it. I believe we call it here Generation C, because they click and they're connected. This is the high-tech generation now. Well, I mean, when you bear in mind what we've just been talking about, we know that the millennial mindset is very much based on wanting an environment in which rapid progression is the norm. But that progression it's somewhat more impatient than it's been before. I hate to sound like an old man. I don't think like an old man. I do apologize. I'm beginning to sound like my father. That worries me. But when they talk about progression, they talk about things like involvement, engagement, recognition. To them, that is much more of a major motivational factor, and far more important for them than the traditional approach, which was often linked to things like titles, status, or even more money. So this is fundamentally changing the traditional approach to developing leaders. So, I mean, over the course of the 20th century, if we look back, we've seen many different theories and practices around leadership, sort of starting really with scientific management, or what became known as Taylorism. This has gone through, that started off with, in other words, in very simple terms, I don't pay you to think, I pay you to do. You have a job, it's assigned to you according to a scientific methodology, and it's a production process. The job is set, that is what you do. We now know that this has been largely discarded. It moved through to what became transactional leadership, where everything is a transaction between the management and the workers, through to situational leadership, depending on what the situation is, depends on what type of leadership approach needs to be done, through to servanthood, which is a sense of service to the organization and to the community, and then on to transformational leadership. And it's transformational leadership, for instance, where our Japanese friends made the biggest sort of breakthroughs. So what we sort of see now in the 21st century is not one or the other of any one of these different forms of leadership. I think what you're seeing is a mixture of the other approaches, with the notable exception of scientific management, which is a completely outdated way of thinking. But sadly, there are examples of it still existing in certain places. Everything now is about an approach which has an emphasis on transformation. And that has to happen because we've got to meet the challenges of operating in this VUCA world. So in my opinion, that is the right approach. Millennials are intensely curious. They're an intensely curious generation. And leadership development of them has to tap into this by training them how to overcome barriers to innovation, how to unleash their imagination so that they can continue to be inspired. They don't just want a job where they just turn up every day. They want and need a challenge, and to feel that they can make a difference. And that is fully compatible with transformational leadership practice.
Thank you.
Agron, would you mind sharing your thoughts in regards of this matter?
Absolutely. Well, I've been hearing this a lot from L&D professionals in the region as well, working on different projects. It's very hard to, motivate Generation X professionals. And, the attention span is very, very short. The technology is there, the distractions are there. Basically, it's these people, these minds are shaped differently. They're exposed to technology, they're exposed to social media. They want everything here and now. So the temper is there. The expectations from life are a bit more higher, I would say, and everyone expects, at least these people, as I can see, expect all the benefits, all their efforts to be, in a way, to have them now.
Yes.
And imagine now, how would you develop these people? We need to adapt the training and development so we can accommodate their needs, their way of living. How do we do it? We use technology. I'm not saying that we will disrupt the traditional ways of development, but I think that we should introduce more and more innovative ways of learning so we can develop this talent and we can nurture it so they become proper leaders in the future. Of course, they will be then having issues with the following generations to accommodate the new needs that may appear with this digital transformation. But I think if we adopt on time and if we use various development solutions, modern solutions, now we have Meta, we have bite-sized learning, we have all kinds of new modern ways of development, I think we can further nurture this new talent that is coming.
Okay, and the last question. Nigel, the fallout from COVID will still pose huge challenges in 2022 in many areas, especially in employee confidence. Strong leaders need to be thinking beyond the pandemic. Can you name 5 rules to navigate an effective leadership in difficult times?
Yeah, it's a difficult subject, and it's very difficult to name just 5. Because there's so many practices, skills, attributes, competencies, all of which go together to make what we'd call effective leadership. Academics in business schools could lecture for hours on this subject, but I guess after 40 years in international business, and I'm more of a practitioner than an academic, I'd have to say, based on my own experience, 5 suggestions rather than rules that you've always got to practice. Firstly, you've got to involve the people.
True.
Secondly, you've got to empathize. Thirdly, adapt. Fourth, this is a big one. You've got to inspire people. And my own personal favorite, which is how I've always tried to lead my life and my career, is make a difference.
Make a difference.
Personally, if I don't feel I can make a difference, I won't bother doing it.
Right. That's how should everyone, feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect observation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for all the information you shared with us, and thanks for being part of this show. It was a real pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is all today for today's episode. Thank you so much for following us again. There is more to come in the next coming days.
Please feel free to leave us a comment or write it if you think there is a topic we can cover for you. Just drop us a message and we will review it with our team. Until next time, stay tuned.